Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Ladar Gravelazian. Coming up in today's newscast, the White House expects imminent Iranian attacks and coordinates with Israel. Defense Minister Gallant says Israel can move quickly from offense to defense. And UNRWA admits that at least 9 of its workers may. Hezbollah has claimed responsibility for a drone attack that critically wounded 1 person and several others in northern Israel. The organization said its attack was aimed at a military base in response to the assassination by Israel yesterday of a commander in the Redwan force. Hezbollah launched multiple drones across the border. Sirens were also heard in the cities of Acre and Nahariya. Several people were wounded. And in a separate incident in Jerusalem, a border police officer was lightly wounded in a stabbing attack at the tunnel's checkpoint. The terrorist arrived at the checkpoint on a bus, which was stopped for inspection. The terrorist then proceeded to stab the officer with a screwdriver, though he also had a knife in his possession. He was eliminated by IDF troops and border police officers on the scene. And Israel and the United States are closely coordinating ahead of a possibly imminent attack on Israel by Iran and its proxies. A top U.S. general is in Israel, and the IDF and allies are ready for any scenario. In Washington, President Biden was briefed by his national security team, which estimated the attack could come at any moment.
At the White House, U.S. President Biden and Vice President Harris met their senior national security team. This after Iran vowed revenge and punishment of Israel, blamed for the assassination of Hamas political leader Haniyeh last week in Tehran. Biden was briefed on preparations to support Israel should it be attacked. During the briefing, Biden was reportedly told the timing and nature of an Iranian attack remained unclear, but it's expected within 48 hours. Secretary of State Blinken said officials were working around the clock to prevent an escalation.
We have been sending consistent messages through our diplomatic engagements, encouraging people to communicate to the government of Iran that escalation is not in their interest, and that we will defend Israel from attacks, and that escalation does not serve Iran's interests, just as it doesn't serve the interests of anyone in the region.
Here in Israel, Defense Minister Gallant met with U.S. CENTCOM Chief General Michael Kurilla, who is visiting Israel and coordinated the Allied response. Jordan today announced that it will not allow the Iranian attack to cross its airspace. IDF Chief Halevi held an assessment and approved plans for different scenarios. Defense Minister Gallant met Air Force commanders and told them to prepare for anything, including a swift transition to offense.
And we're currently fighting a 7-fronted war by Iran that is seeking to strangle us, but we are, of course, seeing down their terrorist proxies. We know how to deal with Iran in ways which we've already shown, and also in other ways which we have not shown you yet. And that means defensively and also offensively as well.
Foreign Minister Katz said that Iran has rejected intense diplomatic pressure from its allies and has decided to attack. Iran reportedly sent a message to that effect through the Hungarian foreign minister. Katz said that the world should exact a price for any aggression carried out by Iran. With an imminent attack expected from Iran, IDF spokesman Hagari said there is still no change to emergency guidelines for civilians.
And joining me now in the studio to discuss the crisis with the Islamic Republic of Iran is Ilan Evyatar, author of a book appropriately titled Target Tehran. Ilan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Great to be with you.
So, knowing the Iranians as you do, what would you estimate will be the scope of their response, and what could an all-out Iranian attack look like?
First of all, let's start with the scope of their response. I think the consensus at the moment is that their response is expected to be measured. They feel that they have been humiliated by the assassination in Tehran a few days ago of Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas, and that they must respond. There are differing, contrary voices coming out of Iran, but I believe that they will seek a point that causes pain on the one hand, but on the other hand, doesn't instantly lead to all-out war.
Mm-hmm. And why take a defensive posture? If we know that an attack is coming, why doesn't Israel simply preempt it?
I think preemptive strike is not necessarily what people may imagine it to be. You know, we had the preemptive strike of the Six-Day War in which Israel destroyed the air forces of Egypt and Syria, but this isn't likely to be something similar. I think Israel should preempt if, for example, there is intelligence that of an all-out attack or an attack that can be prevented, then Israel should preempt. But going into a full preemptive strike will lead to all-out war, most likely, which is something that Israel seeks to avoid, and probably at this stage Iran seeks to avoid. Both sides have their reasons for wishing to avoid a war. From what I understand from intelligence officials that I have spoken to, is that Iran doesn't want all-out war at this stage because it's still seeking to gain a nuclear military umbrella, and Israel doesn't want war at this stage because it's not necessarily ready for war at this stage. We're facing not just Iran, we're facing Hezbollah, we're facing the Houthis in Yemen, the pro-Iranian militias in Iraq, the pro-Iranian militias in Syria, and even from as far away as Afghanistan, pro-Iranian militias are likely to join in the fight. So this is a huge problem, and I think Israel will be probably better off breaking that down into smaller problems and digesting them one at a time.
Yet the longer Israel waits, the more of a likelihood that Iran will attain nuclear capabilities, and then it'll be a whole new ballgame.
If Israel cannot afford to allow Iran to attain nuclear capabilities, we all saw what happened on October 7 and what has happened since October 7. And obviously you can imagine what the situation would be if Iran were to have nuclear capabilities. Israel has operated against Iran's nuclear program for since the mid-1990s, when Israel started its campaign against the Iranian nuclear program. People said that Iran would have military nuclear capability within a few years. Yet, what are we now, 30 years later, Iran still doesn't have nuclear military capability. It has reached the ability to enrich uranium to very high levels, to weapons grade within a very short time, but it still needs to be able to miniaturize a warhead and to put that warhead on a ballistic missile, the means of delivery, and it's still quite away from there. So Israel still has time to act against that.
Still has time. The latest estimates, though, put it at about a 2 weeks breakout time. 2
weeks to enrich sufficient material for a nuclear weapon, but that is still a long way from actually being able to build one and deliver it.
And I want to ask, the U.S. is deeply involved as well in the defense of Israel these days. What about the rest of the coalition that we saw in April? Are they also going to be on board this time around?
Well, we've seen both the United Kingdom move forces towards the area. We can expect France to once again contribute to the defensive effort. Jordan, for example, has taken a slightly different stand, saying that it won't allow Iran to violate its airspace, and it won't allow Israel to violate its airspace. But I think basically we can expect that same coalition of Western countries and of countries in the region that will provide assistance and intelligence, countries that are Sunni, moderate, pragmatic countries and are opposed to Iran as well.
And I want to just ask, in your new book, you take a look at sort of the covert war that's being waged by Israel against the Islamic Republic. Can you give us maybe just a little sneak peek into that?
Sure. I mean, we cover, like I said, the book goes all the way back to the mid-1990s when Israel started its campaign against the Iranian or the Islamic Republic's nuclear weapons program. And we look at various operations, at assassinations of nuclear scientists, at the Israeli removal without permission of the Iranian nuclear archive from the heart of Tehran and how it was smuggled to Israel. We look at the assassination of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, the father of the Iranian nuclear program, the Robert Oppenheimer of Iran, and various other operations, sabotage operations against Iranian nuclear facilities. And in addition to all of that, we also look at how Mossad was involved in the behind-the-scenes diplomacy that led to the creation of the Abraham Accords, to ties with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, and we look at how ties were created, which are still unofficial and below the table with Saudi Arabia, and what the chances are of normalization going ahead despite everything that has happened. So
really fascinating book with a lot of interesting anecdotes, I'm sure, in there. Ilan Evyatar, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
And moving on, day 305 of the war in Gaza, 7 reservists were seriously wounded in the Strip amid heavy clashes in the south. There were also heavy cross-border exchanges in the north, where an IDF airstrike took out a top Hezbollah commander in Lebanon. ILTV's Steve Libovitz has the story.
The Air Force struck in the area of Iba in South Lebanon, killing Radwan Force commander Ali Jawad. The IDF said his killing is a significant blow to Hezbollah's capabilities to carry out attacks on Israel. Hezbollah did fire missiles and drones into northern Israel. Some exploded in the air, while others were shot down by air defense. Sirens were sounded due to falling shrapnel from interceptors. IDF Chief Halevi and top officers met with leaders of the northern communities largely evacuated since October. Halevi reportedly told them that in the event of war, the IDF foresees a potential 3-day power outage in some cities. There will be breakdowns in water supply that could last days, a disconnection of landlines for up to 8 hours, and cell phone communication for up to 24 hours. There would also be brief local disruptions to radio and internet. Turning to Gaza, where 7 reservists were wounded, 4 of them seriously, in a blast in South Gaza. The army said that they were wounded by an explosive device or grenade hurled at them by a Hamas operative. Air Force jets attacked Deir al-Balach in the central Gaza Strip, destroying terror infrastructure. And forces from the Division 162 are operating in the Rafah area. During the last day, the forces eliminated over 25 terrorists.
Israel has long accused the UN Palestinian aid agency UNRWA of being complicit in October 7th massacre by Hamas terrorists. Now, a UN investigation is substantiating at least some of these claims. An internal UN investigation has found that at least 9 UNRWA employees directly participated in the massacre. Israel says it's too little, too late, and says the organization must be disbanded. The United Nations has finally acknowledged that 9 staff members of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, or UNRWA, may have been involved in the October 7th massacre by Hamas and will be fired from the organization. The UN carried out an internal investigation by its Office of Internal Oversight Services, which looked into 19 UNRWA members that Israel had accused of being involved in the attacks. The report, which will not be made public, found that there was only sufficient evidence to implicate 9 of these employees.
Out of those 19, that in 10 cases, there's either no information or insufficient information to support the allegations of their involvement in the October 7th attacks. The 9 for whom there is sufficient information will be terminated. And that, of course, includes some who had been terminated earlier as in the immediate aftermath of the reporting.
A number of countries, including the United States, cut their funding to UNRWA after the revelations of its involvement in terrorism came to light. Yet several countries are now reinstating funding to the organization. Israeli ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, said the investigation was a disgrace and that it was too little, too late. In a statement, he said that the investigation ignored the thousands of agency employees involved in Hamas terrorist activities and the scope of their involvement. He said that Israel has provided the UN with precise details of over 100 UNRWA employees who are members of the terrorist organization Hamas. Yet, despite the cooperation and information that Israel passed on to the UN, the conclusions of the investigation are another stain on the UN, which still refuses to recognize the reality. Erdan added that if that wasn't enough, the Secretary General recently chose to award UNRWA Gaza the UN Secretary General's Award for 2023. And he called on Antonio Guterres to resign and to shut down UNRWA. And relations between Jerusalem and Ankara continue to deteriorate as Turkey announced it will officially join South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice this week. The details in the following report. Turkey has announced that it will formally join South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice in The Hague. Speaking at a joint press conference with his Egyptian counterpart in Cairo, the Turkish foreign minister announced his country would be submitting a declaration of intervention to the court on Wednesday.
İsrail'in Uluslararası Adalet Divanı'nda yargılandığı sürecin yakın takipçisiyiz. Bu davaya Türkiye olarak müdahil olma kararı almıştık hatırlayacağınız gibi. İnşallah çarşamba günü başvuru dosyamızı mahkemeye teslim ediyoruz. Orta Doğu'da barışın yolu gerçek anlamda bir Filistin devleti kurulmasından geçiyor. Filistinli kardeşlerimizin başkenti Doğu Kudüs olan bağımsız, egemen ve coğrafi bütünlüğe ait bir devleti olmalı.
While in Egypt on Sunday, the Turkish foreign minister also visited the Rafah crossing, inspecting aid operations and supplies. Turkey had previously announced its intention to join the case in May as it has stepped up measures against Israel over the war in Gaza, including cutting all trade ties with Israel. And on tonight's ILTV's Insider that can be seen later this evening, ILTV's editor-in-chief Mayan Hoffman and Steve Leibovitz will interview former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. Mayan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So what can you tell us about your interview with Ehud Olmert?
Well, you know, what is expected is that we, of course, started by speaking about the terror situation here in Israel, the issue that we have going on with Iran and Hezbollah. Ehud Olmert, if you remember, was prime minister during the Second Lebanon War and ran that war in just a few weeks, got us out of there and led to 17 years of deterrent. So I think the punchline of Olmert's interview actually comes down to the strategy and the fact that he believes that in the current government, we don't have enough of that. Now, Ehud, of course, is sort of anti-Bibi for a long time and has been a rival of the prime minister. On that same note, though, he said what I think is very important, which is that we are up for American elections in November. We don't know whether former U.S. President Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, who is likely to be, of course, the candidate, will go and take over in the White House. But Olmert's opinion is this, that no matter who takes over in the White House, if we don't have a change of leadership, not just in the prime minister, but in our entire government, in how we manage both our borders and our relationships abroad with the international community, that we might be at risk of losing U.S. support in the White House.
Well, sounds like a very, very interesting interview, and I'm looking forward to seeing that later tonight. And for our viewers, don't miss ILTV's Insider tonight. And moving on, at least 5 American personnel were injured on Monday in an attack against a U.S. military base, the Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq. According to reports, 2 Katyusha rockets were fired by Iran-backed terror proxies and managed to fall inside the base. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said this marked a dangerous escalation. In a call with Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, Austin said that the attack demonstrated Iran's destabilizing role in the region, and added that the U.S. would further strengthen its military posture in the Middle East in response. During the call, Austin also reiterated the U.S.'s unwavering commitment to Israel's security in the face of threats from Iran, Hezbollah, and the other Iranian terror proxies in the region. And moving on, Kamala Harris has selected a vice presidential candidate. ILTV's Mayan Hoffman has all the details.
Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris has selected Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her vice president running mate. But until a few hours ago, we thought that America had a chance at a Jewish VP. Jewish Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, 51, gained prominence in the party and enjoyed high approval ratings in Pennsylvania. With 19 electoral votes, Pennsylvania is crucial for Harris and Trump to win. If he had been chosen, Shapiro would have potentially become the first Jewish vice president, bringing historical significance to the ticket. Shapiro's firm stance on Israel could have distanced some progressive voters, which is maybe why Harris chose not to select him. However, it could have attracted moderates and countered Republican attempts to use the Israel-Gaza conflict against Democrats. His outspoken support for Israel would have come at a time when Harris is facing criticism from pro-Israel activists. Shapiro was sworn into his role last year on a stack of Hebrew Bibles that came from the site of the 2018 Pittsburgh synagogue shooting. He is a Jewish day school graduate and sends his kids to the same school. The family attends the conservative Beth Shalom congregation in Elkins Park. However, there were questions around his potential candidacy, in that there were fears that anti-Semitism against Shapiro or any Jewish candidate could have harmed the Harris ticket. Nonetheless, Pennsylvania residents said they were excited at Harris's potential pick.
I think Governor Shapiro is an excellent choice for Vice President Harris. I think he would do a lot of great things for the country and be able to tackle some hard issues. And it's a swing state. That's an important thing as well.
Vice President Harris announced Walz at around 4 p.m. Israel time, shortly before what will soon be their joint appearance at Temple University in Philadelphia. This rally will begin a 5-day, 7-city tour through key battleground states leading to the November 5 election. Choosing a running mate was vital for Harris as she prepares to face Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump and his VP pick, Senator J.D. Vance.
And the news in Israel is always bustling, especially now as we're headed toward a multi-front war. But Yael Eckstein, CEO and founder of IFCJ, is here to give you recent news highlights. Let's take a look.
Shalom, my friends, and here are 3 things that you should know about Israel this week. Number 1, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recently flew to America where he addressed Congress. He gave a historic speech that outlined the war that Israel is in for our survival and how America and Israel need to be in this together. The same threats that Israel faces are a threat to America and Europe and the entire free world. We need unity now. Number 2, earlier this week, a rocket which was launched by Hezbollah hit a soccer field and killed children. These are innocent children who went to play, who were wiped out, destroyed, murdered by this terror organization. Israel responded by target killing the person in Hezbollah, the top terrorist who was responsible for this attack. He was a wanted man by America as well, as he was behind the bombing that killed over 200 Americans. Israel needs to wipe out this evil. That's why they targeted the head of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, in Iran as well. Israel needs to dismantle the terror that is threatening us all. Number 3, in some fellowship news. Following the attack on the Druze village where the children were killed, there were dozens who were injured. The first ambulance to arrive at the scene was a fellowship-donated ambulance. And those ambulances brought the children to hospitals. Both the Ziv Hospital in northern Israel, where the fellowship donated an MRI machine that was used on the children, and in Haifa to Rambam Hospital, where there were children who were brought directly to the underground protected trauma surgical unit that the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews donated. The fellowship is everywhere in Israel, representing Christians and Jews who are not only standing behind Israel in this war for survival, but investing in saving lives. Well, there you have it, friends. Those are 3 things that you now know about Israel this week. Join me next week to stay up to date on the breaking news of what's happening in the Holy Land. Shalom.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Mostly clear skies are expected tonight around the country, with temperatures reaching lows of 22 degrees Celsius or 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, mostly sunny skies and hot weather is expected, as temperatures should be reaching highs of 35 degrees Celsius or 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Ladar Gravelazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.